Hello and welcome to Little Red Notebook's Take a Seat series, a series of short conversations with neurodiverse trailblazers. Zero pity, pure wins, and zero deficit talk. In this episode, we're joined by Gerard Atkinson, Managing Director and founder of Iris Ethics. Gerard lives with autism. Welcome to Take a Seat, Gerard.
Thank you for having me.
We're so honoured to have you because considering you've been in a conference this week, how's it been?
It's been busy. It's the first time that we've really taken Iris Ethics on the road and gone out to meet with customers, with clients, and it's been really exciting to have the conversations around how we can serve the communities that we've set up this business to work with. So we work predominantly with the market research, social research, and program and policy evaluation sectors. And so yeah, over the next month or so, I'm going to a few conferences to meet with people who are working in those industries to understand how we can best work with them to deliver ethical research with people.
Before we get into the journey towards your diagnosis, how's the energy management been from an autistic point of view? Because conferences can be quite overwhelming for a lot of us.
They can be, and I'm not immune to that. It is about energy management over the course of a day, really sort of planning out times to take breaks, trying to have sort of backups in place where possible. So the next conference I'm going to is going to be very, very busy, and I'm lucky enough to have some colleagues there who have said more than happy to step in and look after things if I need to just duck out, get some fresh air, and recenter. But I think it does come down to time and energy management and self-awareness where possible, and just knowing that you have in place some valves, like being able to step out if needed.
Yeah, that's important to be able to step in and out, isn't it? It's a good strategy to have. Often we feel like we've got to be in it all the time, but it's just not possible in a lot of cases. I found that, especially when I've been to conferences and major events and things like that, that stepping out is really important. Fill us in on your journey towards your diagnosis of autism, which happened in 2019.
That's right. So, I mean, it's worth reinforcing the fact that autism is lifelong. And I've said to people, when I was growing up, when I was in school, we didn't have an understanding of autism within society that we have now. And I went through school and had issues, but they were labeled as behavioral issues. They were labeled as giftedness because I was able to mask to some degree. I was able to perform well academically. And so I got put in the gifted bucket and everything got attributed to that. And it was only, around 2018, 2019, where I was working in a consulting firm, and it was a friend of mine who shared his story and his journey to diagnosis. He's a botanist, and he was talking about his experiences growing up and some of the things that he noticed about himself. And as I was reading it, it just resonated in a way that was too strong not to notice. And I thought, oh, maybe that is something I need to look into. And coming from a scientific and literary background, I immediately just jumped into the research, tried to sort of understand autism, the history of it, the diagnostic process, and that led me to go seek out a neuropsychologist and get a formal diagnosis. And for me, that was really about confirmation, peace of mind, and using that as a stepping stone to better understanding myself and what I can do and how best to manage my energy and my thinking so that I can do well.
What's been the biggest takeaway from that diagnosis that you've had?
I think it's kind of highlighted to me just how much I have worked to try and fit into society. And, you know, there are things that about that I think I'm really proud of. I think by working on it, I've been able to better understand how people think and how people work and adapt my approach around that. But it's also that recognition that that takes work and that takes time. And it helped me kind of understand how that all linked together and to perhaps be a little less hard on myself for not always getting it right. And being able to understand that, no, I am working on this. This is taking up energy and it does produce results, but there's at least an explanation as to why it works the way it does for me.
Have you changed much since the diagnosis, professionally and personally? Because you talked a lot about masking and fitting in, and you're in the corporate space, so I'd imagine that masking was really high level masking. What has changed?
I think I have been able to be more open about the way that I think, the way that I approach situations, the way that I engage socially and professionally with other people. And I think illuminating that and being able to be open about how that works and how that plays out actually sets the groundwork for more respectful conversation. It opens the space. And I found that in doing so, that's helped other people to be comfortable with how they approach conversations. We can actually have a deeper dialogue about our ways of thinking, seeing, and knowing, and use that as a jumping off point for respectful engagement and deeper thought.
What value has it given you in terms of your professional work? Because you work in, the corporate space
Mm.
and the consultancy space. What value has that brought, if
In
any?
terms of autism generally, I feel like for me, and this is about the way it sort of manifests for me, is that it's a huge advantage in the kind of consulting that I've done in the past because one, I very good at time management, and time management is paramount in consulting. Your clients want everything done yesterday, and I've been on the client side as well, and I understand why they need it done yesterday. And so being able to manage your time and productivity effectively is a core skill. Another thing that I'm particularly good at is pattern recognition, data analysis. And for me, looking at a spreadsheet full of numbers, I can visualize that in my own mind. It just jumps off the page. I can see the patterns and the threads. And that's a really useful skill to have in consulting because sometimes you're able to see patterns and threads that others don't see, and you can bring that out and illuminate those things that are happening with your clients. You can identify new ways and new approaches to solving problems, and that's a really valuable skill to have in this kind of work. And I feel like I've transferred that to the new business of Iris Ethics. We've had an opportunity to build a business from scratch, and in doing so, question all the fundamental assumptions about how you do this kind of work. And so it was quite liberating to sort of say, well, here's the existing system. This system causes friction. Can we think about the system in a different way? Can we take out some of the friction? One of the things I've been saying is that, traditionally, you have this trade-off between high speed and high quality. And that's no different for the kind of work we do, at least in the past. With what we're doing, I thought, well, why can't we make that work? What is it within the system that creates the trade off? And so we looked into the way that we designed things and found that if we remove the friction points in the process, we are able to operate quicker, but we're also able to use information in a way that is less open to misinterpretation. And in doing so, we raise the quality of the work. And there's a few things about the way that we operate as a business, and it's incorporated neuro-friendly and neuro-affirming principles. So we are virtual, we're remote, we're asynchronous. So that in itself completely changes the review process, which has typically been an application goes in, a meeting is scheduled, the meeting happens, somebody goes and writes up the report. We said that there's all these time gaps in there that are not being used. We'd rather have an application go in and have people start looking at it straight away, asking questions, having that dialogue asynchronously and virtually, and then we can be asking questions and engaging with the applicant throughout that process, so that when we go to a meeting, if we go to a meeting, we're focusing on what's important in that and able to resolve things far more quickly and in a way that we all have a shared understanding of what's going on. So, that ability to question the existing systems, to see patterns and identify things that others might not see is an absolutely core skill, and it's something I'm really lucky to have.
Is there much reluctance when someone new comes into the landscape and you're talking about these things? Because I remember back when I'm doing consulting, and it's interesting, word of mouth is the biggest thing, and one of my clients described it as, I don't know how SJ does it, but the impact is immense. Is that what is that some of the conversations that are happening around you as a result of that?
A little bit. When I've taught consulting theory, in my previous consulting firm, I headed up learning and development, and I would teach a seminar on consulting theory and how the business operates. And you're absolutely right. It's word of mouth. It's an experience business. People are buying the experience of a consultant. And if that's the case, then people do bring preconceptions about consulting. They come from their prior experiences. And to win work, you've got to show that you can deliver something different, something that resonates with them and what they value. And it can be about identifying that. And I think sometimes as a consultant, if you're lucky, you do get to pick your customers and pick your clients, because the value proposition that you set out is one that resonates with the clients you want to work with. And so by being able to say, look, we look at things differently, we do offer a different product, that does resonate with clients who are seeking something different, something beyond the normal. And I also say it's the clients who are seeking solutions to the hard problems. When I've mentored junior staff, I say, you want to be doing yourself out of a job all the time, because if we're still solving the same problems 5 years hence, then we've not done a good job. We want to keep pushing ourselves and keep looking for that new problem to solve. And that requires creative thinking and looking at things differently all the time, as well as drawing on those past experiences and drawing upon broad knowledge bases to look for solutions and see those patterns and say, well, this over here in a completely different domain can actually be relevant in this. So let's have a go at applying that there and create that solution.
Iris Ethics is your baby. What was it like stepping out into your own business, your own consultancy?
Oh, it's absolutely scary. It does take a lot of courage to be able to walk away from, a great job that I had as a director at ARTD Consultants. I'd been there 7 years, and I had a fantastic team that I was working with and a great organizational culture. And at the same time, Iris Ethics was not a spur of the moment decision. It's been the product of conversations that have been taking place in the sector for at least a decade.
Mhm.
And in the background, I'd been working on the business model and been in discussions with the CEO of ARTD Consultants for some years about how might we approach the challenges that we face in terms of doing ethical research and evaluation and getting that level of oversight, peer review, and advice around how to effectively manage risks in research. And so for about 2 or 3 years, I'd been scoping out the business model, having discussions in the background with various members of the community to see what was needed, how we might approach this. And it was at the beginning of this year that things started to fall into place where I started to really become confident that there was a shared need across the sector for this kind of work and that there was a business model that could be viable in serving that sector and that market. And so about April, I took the plunge, registered the business, and the conversation with the CEO, it's never an easy one, but because we had had those conversations for such a long time and a pretty open rapport, it wasn't unexpected. It was something that we knew was coming. It was just about setting the day for it.
Ethics as a service. Tell me about that.
So we wanted to move beyond the conception of human research ethics approval as being a compliance exercise. Now, typically, when people have to deal with ethics committees, it's something where you put in an application because you want to do some research, and the ethics committee will look at it on some set meeting schedule and then come back and say, no, you need to do this, this, and this with your application, otherwise you can't do the research. And there was a lot of friction in the process. There was a lot of time in the process. It can take anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to get ethical approval typically. And we thought about this and went, this isn't serving us as researchers, but it's also not serving the people and the communities that we do research with. When it comes to market research, when it comes to social research, you can often be operating in very short timeframes. And if you miss that window to engage with a community, you miss the opportunity to get useful information. And the community often doesn't get a chance to tell their stories and feel as if they've been listened to in the process. And when we're talking about things like policy development for governments and program development for governments and trying to create opportunities to build better societies, if we miss those windows, then we miss those opportunities. And so we could see that there needed to be something faster. There needed to be something that understood the reality of doing work in these contexts and understanding what good ethical research and evaluation looks like in these contexts. And so that's where we kind of move towards Iris ethics and saying, well, it's not ethics as a compliance process, it's ethics that's in service of our communities and our clients to try and build a more empowered approach to research and evaluation.
You're chairperson of Reframing Autism.
That's possibly an old bio. I was chairperson of Reframing Autism a few years ago. I stepped aside from that position to focus on a few other things, but I still hold a lot of time for that organization. It's one that has really been grounded in the idea of autistic-led advocacy and resources for the community, and doing so in a way that is very evidence-driven, it's research-driven, and that's a really important mission. In terms of my current governance roles, I am on the Australasian Autism Research Council, so the advisory panel to the Autism CRC, and doing some really interesting work there, again, around ethics. And the work there has been really focused on how do we ethically engage with autistic and neurodivergent communities in the co-design and the co-production of research that is relevant to those communities rather than it being sort of imposed from top down. How do we get people involved in a way that is neuro-affirming, and how do we work with ethics committees like mine to understand what good practice looks like, so that when ethics committees are reviewing proposals for research with autistic communities, they know what to look for and they know what advice to give on how to conduct that in a way that incorporates autistic lived experience perspectives from the get-go. And so that's been a really exciting project to work on with some really great researchers like Patrick Dwyer and Beck Poulsen. And then the other governance role I have is on the board of the Social Impact Measurement Network of Australia. And this is Australia's peak body for social impact measurement, really trying to understand that, how policies and programs and initiatives change communities and what positive impacts they have on our society, and how do we measure that effectively, and what are the kinds of things that we need to look for, what are the ways that we can gather information along the way. And that's been a really exciting organization to be in. It's relatively new and it's been growing, and to watch that really thrive and grow and be able to offer new things to the community. So we're now able to do training, we're providing resource libraries, as well as this core function of being a network for people who work in this space, because they don't always get the opportunity to talk to each other and share their experiences and what they've learned. And so being able to bring people together around a common cause like that has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's really important work. Where do you see the state of play at the moment in terms of how autism is not only narrated, but perceived, especially in the corporate sector?
It's a really interesting space to be in at the moment, because there's almost two narratives that come up. There's the narrative around autism and childhood, particularly because of some of the conversations that have been had around the NDIS. But at the same time, in the corporate world, the talk is around autism and employment, and it kind of falls into two camps, and it's very difficult to sort of reconcile the thinking, because it is the reality that autistic people can make hugely positive contributions in corporate environments, in employment, when people are supported, and I mean all people are supported and given an environment in which to flourish and thrive, they can do great work. And there are some corporates, and just this week I saw in the Australian Financial Review that KPMG are really going on the warpath about how great autistic employees can be, and that they are wanting to hire autistic people, neurodivergent people, because of the skills that they have and how they synergize with the work that KPMG does. And they want to build those environments. The counter narrative is that autistic people have an unemployment rate that is 6 times that of the general population. And so there's still a gap there in terms of how do we get people around not just the good news stories around autistic people being able to bring really unique skill sets, but also that we need to build better environments in which people can thrive, whether it's autistic people or just all people. Because one of the big takeaways around accessibility and having done work in universal design theory is that when you take that approach and identify how we can improve accessibility and support for one person in the environment, we often find that that supports other people as well. That making that available, other people can recognize that, oh, this actually helps me work better too. So, having those conversations and lifting that narrative up not only supports autistic people, but helps build a more inclusive and productive society.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go back a little bit now. In 2013, I read that you packed up, you sold everything and moved to Dallas.
That's right. It was an interesting time in my life. I had been working in government for some years in the public service, and I felt like it was a time where I didn't feel like I was making much progress career wise. And at the same time, I had this parallel career path going on where I was falling into the world of professional singing and opera. And I got tapped on the shoulder to help start an opera company in Canberra, which is now the National Opera down in Canberra. And I was very interested in it. I knew I liked it. I also knew I had no idea what I was doing. And I felt with where I was in my career, it was the right time and the right opportunity to think about, well, how can I go invest in myself and perhaps learn how to build these companies? And I looked around, and there was a program at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, where you could do 2 master's degrees in 2 years. And you would get a Master's of Business Administration as well as a Master of Arts in Arts Management. And you would work closely with corporates as well as arts companies to learn how the business of it was being done. And I thought that's a fabulous opportunity. And I got an offer to join that program. They only take in maybe 10, 15 students a year into that program. So I was very lucky to be a part of that. And yeah, packed up my stuff and moved to Texas. It wasn't the first time I'd lived in America, but it had been a long time since I'd been in the US. And certainly Texas is its own culture within the US. It's almost a different country to the US in many ways, but I loved it. It was a fantastic experience, and being able to work with some of the leading companies in the world. So I spent some time working at the Dallas Opera, which is a very reputable and well-regarded company, and I was able to travel across to Italy and learn from some of the top museum managers in Italy around how they run their organizations and think about how the art is intertwined with the corporate management side. And it was a really big learning experience. And it was also where I learned a lot about how organizational cultures work, how we think about strategy and mission, and how we can measure that as well. How do we understand the impact that we have on our communities through data as well as stories? And so that was a fabulous experience, and I still use the things that I learned from those degree programs to this day, both on the arts side, even though I don't work directly in the arts now. Many of the teachings around, thinking about the culture, thinking about the impact that we have on society, that's been really core to the way that I've chosen to approach my work as a consultant.
Are you still singing opera? Because you're a trained opera singer.
That's right. I don't tend to sing opera so much now, maybe in the shower. But where I live now, there's not really a big opera scene. And so I don't really get the opportunities. I also realized around the time that I moved to Dallas, I had the choice to pursue opera professionally. And I realized pretty quickly that that was going to be a very hard slog, and with no certainty of being even able to build a career in it. And I also knew that there were a lot of brilliant young singers that were coming up behind me who, for them, singing was everything. They didn't have the luxury of a fallback position like I had, who, been in a government job and already had a degree and a career path. So when I got back to Australia in 2016, I became involved with a company called the Pacific Opera, and they do a young artist program. And so I was able to continue my love of singing and love of music by working with those young singers to help them build their careers. And every time that they did a concert and needed an extra bass or bass baritone, they knew I was at the end of the phone. And I would get a call, 3 days before a gig, and it's like, hey, can you come and join the chorus for this or play this role in this scene? And that allowed me to scratch that itch. But yeah, now that I live out in country Victoria, those opportunities are a little bit more few and far between.
I think I read somewhere about song parodies.
Yes. So my wife, who is also neurodivergent, she's autistic ADHD. She's done a lot of creative projects throughout her career, and she's a writer and has her own biographical database online called Infinite Women. And one of the things that she did was a show called The Millennial Opera, where it was taking the classics of opera, all these tunes that we know, and rewriting the lyrics, Weird Al Yankovic style, where it was all themed around millennials. And the sort of title track of it is Millennials Ruin Everything. And so it was this hilarious parody. And it also was a bit of a comment on some of the problematic aspects of opera and the stories that it tells and the themes that were covered. And it was an opportunity to rewrite some of those so that, they were either skewering the narratives, the problematic narratives, or they were redirected in a way that was much more wholesome. So, for example, one of the songs I sang was taken originally from Mozart's opera Don Giovanni, and the original song lyrics are quite problematic. The singer is talking about how his master, Don Giovanni, has slept with 1,800 women. And that's uncomfortable for many reasons. And in rewriting it, Alison chose to do something more wholesome and rewrite it as Don Giovanni rescuing dogs. And so he's rescued over 1,800 dogs. And here I am singing about all the different breeds of dogs that Don Giovanni has rescued. And so it's a much more wholesome and happy take on it, whilst losing nothing of the musical finesse, because Mozart, who wrote the original, absolute genius when it came to music. And I think he would have approved of the wholesome silliness of the new lyrics and the relevance to today's context.
Yeah. Tell me about Warrnambool.
Warrnambool is this beautiful gem of city that quite often I find I'm talking to people and they're like, where's Warrnambool? And it's okay because I barely knew where Warrnambool was when I chose to move there. So mid-COVID, my wife Alison and I, we decided that we wanted to move away from Sydney. We wanted to be somewhere a little less crowded and still have certain conveniences, close access to a major city. And because we're both nerds, we created a spreadsheet and we listed out in the spreadsheet all the things we wanted in a good city, and then looked around Australia and looked at all these different locations. And as we did that, as we went through that matrix of what do different places have to offer, Warrnambool just kept jumping out to the top. And I thought, well, I've only ever been through Warrnambool once, and it was driving through on the way to Melbourne. I've never really been there. So, of course, like any reasonable individual, I opened up Wikipedia and started researching about Warrnambool. And at the bottom of the page on Wikipedia, there's always a famous people from Warrnambool kind of thing. And as I'm looking through the list of famous people, I realize I recognize one of the names. And so I get on the phone to my friend Ben. And the first thing I say to him is, you know, you got a Wikipedia page about you. And he's like, yes, you idiot. I was on Home and Away and Neighbours. And I'm like, that tracks. Ben is a friend of mine who I've worked with on stage in theatre productions for quite some time. And we had always worked closely together. Often we'd be hired as a pair because of our rapport and also the physical comedy of the pairing, because he was the hunk. He still is the hunk. He's an incredibly good-looking gentleman, and of course, it's no wonder he ended up on Home and Away, because he's got the look for it. He is a teen heartthrob, and I would always play the ugly, clumsy offsider to his suave gentleman. And so, yeah, he had gone to Warrnambool and he had grown up there. And I said to him, look, is it a good town? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, great, move in there. And haven't looked back. It's a really beautiful town. It's on the beach, and it's got some variable weather, but it keeps things exciting. The quality of life is good. For me, coffee's important, and they've got some great coffee places. And as it turns out, just from an autistic research standpoint, there is a reasonably strong autistic and neurodivergent community there. And if people know Wen Lawson, Dr. Wen Lawson, who's one of the originators of monotropism theory, Wen lives the other side of town to me. So we joke that between us, we're the Warrnambool autistic research cabal. And Wen gets East Warrnambool and I get West Warrnambool.
It's whale season at the moment, isn't it, in Warrnambool?
It is, yes. We've had a few whales go past. Plenty of people up at the viewing platforms there.
That's Logan's Beach.
Yes, Logan's Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Last
spend a
couple of
lot of
weeks,
time.
yeah.
Sorry?
The last couple of weeks, I wouldn't be going down to the beach so much because of that Antarctic blast. The waves are getting pretty high and pretty choppy. But on a good day, it's beautiful surf as well.
Yeah, it's a beautiful city, Warrnambool. And congratulations that are in order. A personal best in 10K.
Ah, yes. So running's one of the things I sort of do on the side. I find it helpful as a mental focus, and I think exercise is really important for mental health and energy management. And I find if I don't go on a run on a morning where I'm meant to be running, it does affect me for the rest of the day. It just helps me get into the right headspace, frame of mind. And yeah, I've been training up for the Melbourne Marathon, and along the way, I've been getting faster and faster and set some PBs, and we'll see how we go in a few weeks at Melbourne Marathon. But yeah, it's a really good way for me just to process things and sometimes, step away, get inside my own head and just clear things out. And I know I'm not the only autistic running enthusiast. Famous example is Grace Tame, who's absolutely tearing it up as an ultra marathoner. She ran the Great Ocean Road ultra marathon this year. I was running the regular marathon. I did not see her once because she was way up the front, and I was way up the back, just enjoying the scenery and enjoying the experience. But it is something that there are a lot of autistic people who find running as a good way to sort of self-manage and process information and improve their physical and their mental health.
I both run and cycled the Great Ocean Road. How amazing, isn't it?
It's absolutely spectacular. There's not really many places like it in the world. The closest thing I can think of internationally is somewhere like the Cinque Terre in Italy, or the highway in California that goes up the coast there. But I do think the Great Ocean Road is probably better than California. Cinque Terre is absolutely spectacular, beautiful, but it is also quite crowded, and it has fallen prey to a bit of over tourism. So you have to kind of take that into account. But on a quiet day, it is absolutely beautiful. But the Great Ocean Road is one of those things that I say to my friends who are overseas: if you come to Australia, you've got to do it.
It's been amazing to chat to you, Gerard. It's such an honour to have you here, and some of the things you've talked about, will resonate very strongly with our audience. So I appreciate you being involved in Take a Seat.
Again, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be able to chat, and yeah, thanks to all the listeners for being a part of this conversation.